All right, lovely. Let's roll. Hari, firstly, very warm welcome to what is episode 4 of the People Story. And thanks so much for agreeing to spend this time with us and to talk about something I know that's very close to your heart. That's on the topic of culture at BigBasket, Hari. And you were just starting to mention that this is actually the first ever talk you've given on culture at BigBasket. So I didn't realize it, but very privileged to have landed a scoop or an exclusive, as it were. But how come that was unusual to me, Hari? I would imagine you were giving these kinds of talks all the time. Any reason for that?
Yeah, I don't, culture is so dear and close to us, and it's so much for me, it's so much internal and so much within the organization that we've never found the need to go and tom around and talk to people about our culture. It's just that. So never had the need. But I'm sure my colleague Hari Menon would have. Of course, the book revolves a lot around it, which is saying no to Jugaad. So there would have been times when you'd have done it, and I think you would have done it on LinkedIn. But as such, we haven't done. I haven't never done it. And my management team and my founders, I'm sure, also haven't done it. So, but we talk about it. We talk about it all the time. We talk about it in our board meetings. We talk about it with people outside, but not an event like this where I'm sitting here and talking about culture and about.
Got it. So as if we weren't feeling excited enough already, Hari, now you've sort of 10x our excitement, if I may use a cheap pun. But it's interesting the way you put it. It's almost like air or water. You take it so much for granted. You don't notice it, but it keeps you alive. That's sort of the way, sounds like the way you think about it. So I want to start us off taking us some years back to your journey when you actually started, Hari. So I'd love to hear a little bit of the story of when you actually were getting started. What were some of the fundamental things you were focused on as a company in the early weeks, months, and years of building BigBasket? Walk us through a little bit of the early story.
Yeah. So we started in December 2011, and I think it was sometime around June or July of 2011 that a lot of you would know K. Ganesh, who's a serial entrepreneur. Approached us and said, hey guys, there's an opportunity to start something all over again. And we had just exited our previous venture in early 2007, end 2006, right? And there was this gap of a few years where all of us did different things, right? I went and actually set up and was building a skill development organization for Manipal, which is something that today I continue to be very, very passionate about. I have a very strong foot there. I sit on the board of a very, very good company in that space called Libanet. I used to work very closely with the NSDC, and I'm also on the board of the RASCI, which is the Retailers Association of India's skill development body and stuff like that. So a very strong footing there. So a few years there, and then Ganesh came.
I'm going to put a bookmark in this, Hari, and come back to this. You're also life of having more energy than most of us have in one thing. You seem to have for multiple things. So I'm going to put a bookmark in that and come back to it later in the conversation. But don't interrupt your story. Please continue.
Development is the other one that I'm very, very passionate about, because there's so much to do there, and that's so much little done. So Ganesh came, and we used to meet every 3-4 months to figure out is there something new that we could do while we were doing whatever we were doing, and we weren't finding anything. And I tell you, when Ganesh came and said it's grocery, and it took me a few seconds. It took Sudhakar, I think, a few seconds, and it took Vipul a few seconds. That's all it did to say yes. And then we were next, actually, within I think a few hours at Cafe Coffee Day, trying to figure out what next to do. So that's really how it all got started. Fundamentally, I think being grocery is what excited us, because obviously it's something that we've done in the past, and it's now leveraging so much of learning that we had for almost 6-7 years of building a physical grocery chain. And we understood the supply chain, and we also built an online store, which was FabMart. So there was the learning of online and the learning of the entire supply chain, which excited us. One, secondly, what excited us was that it's a very complex category, and that was even more exciting. Saying, if you're doing something in a complex category and if you're solving a problem there, then I think it's going to be fun, real fun. So we said, yes, there is a problem to solve there. The way people buy grocery today, it's such a chore. Is there a way you can make life easy for the lady at home? By just getting this whole business online. And so there was obviously a great opportunity to kind of do that, because the other good thing, and we were fortunate about that, is that there was nobody else, right? So when you get these early starts and early move advantages, you just need to grab it, right? And so one of the things that we told ourselves is that speed is very critical. So I'll come to that, and ways in which we actually, it helped us put this whole piece on culture together, right? So a lot of it was to do with what we had set out to do, and I guess that's where you're also coming from, Saiki. So and it's very relevant. So we said we should disrupt that space and figure out how we can grab that opportunity. We also said that to make life even more tougher, that the category that we should really look at cracking is fruits and vegetables, right? So that became even harder, right? So the toughest category in this space, and so we decided that we'll start that day one. Right? So that was the most important thing we took a call on, saying if we do this well, then we can differentiate ourselves well. If you don't do it well, you're dead. And that's the risk of taking on a category like that early, because globally, most e-commerce grocery companies bring in fruits and vegetables much later, because they set their whole systems, using FMCG, because it's easier in one sense, because it's finally just logistics there. But you kind of don't bring in those complexities of short shelf life and dealing with farmers and all the other issues linked to that. But we decided to do day one, and we said that will what will define quality of BigBasket. Quality is not defined by Surf Excel. Quality is defined by fruits and vegetables, right? And if you get that piece right, we are done. If you don't get it right, you're dead. Because then that whole element of quality goes away, because it's also linked to meats and it's linked to staples, a whole lot of other private labels that that we'll start launching.
Right.
It is critical to tell ourselves, what do we want to do, where do we want to go, how big we want to become. So we told ourselves, see, listen, we don't want to look at just the online space. So we told ourselves that can we, in the next 5-6 years, become amongst the top 3 players in the entire grocery ecosystem, which means including physical stores. Because we told ourselves that the real competition for the next few years for us is physical stores. It's not online. It's really moving people from the way they are currently buying to a new way of buying, right? And to break that inertia, which we believed was one of the toughest things to do, in this business, continues to be tough, continues to be a problem, continues to be an issue for us, which we are continuously trying to solve. So be amongst the top 3. Finally, I think the important thing that was key to us was it's a consumer business, and hence we must from day one, build a culture in the organization that we'll build, which is highly customer centric. And we told ourselves that we should differentiate ourselves there. Everybody says customer. Everybody talks about customer is king, customer is this, customer is that. But executing to it, right, was what we said we should do exceedingly well, right? And so that was one of the things that we told ourselves, that customer is going to be at the center of this, this business. And if you are able to kind of bring that sensitivity in amongst us, amongst people, amongst everybody in the ecosystem, then I think you'll win this game. So that's how it was, and finally, the most important thing was at that point in time was to tell ourselves that this business is complex. Obviously, this business has so many challenges, and hence for the next few years, right, if you have the opportunity and nobody else comes in and tries to disrupt the space, you will basically build such a strong backend, right? Because finally delivering and service quality in grocery is far more critical, than anything else, right? So even building a user interface, which with all kinds of fancy stuff and all kinds of things. I remember there was a small competitor there who was actually, that UI was so great that moment you want to add to basket, it will actually fly and come, right? So we told ourselves, hey, listen, life for a lady at home, is very different, right? You got to make it very simple. You got to make it so easy to use, because it's a completely different set of people that you're really going to get to buy eventually, right? So a lot of these things told us that, we should only focus on building a backend which is robust, which delivers to the customer, right? And that's how we evolved those three key metrics, right? Which even today, in my sleep, when I wake up, that's the only thing that hits me hard, right? And we said, if we get these three things right, and we called those couple of years the years of backend. That we actually named it like that. We called it the years of the backend, right? So we said we won't market ourselves, we won't do much. We'll limit ourselves to 1 or 2 cities. We'll just go to people we know, and there were enough people that you could market yourselves with, alumni, this, that, and we did a few of those things and got to people. But we said get three things right: get your fill rate right, get your on-time delivery right, and get your in-stock right, right? That's the most critical in this business. If you crack these three, you're done, right? Then your service quality is there, and it's not easy for anybody to crack it. But you then create a large distance between people, and that's how we got started. And we just believed in these three things. Told ourselves that speed is critical because we got to move and do this before anybody else comes in. Because that's a time when actually investments are also happening all over the place, right? So investors were getting very frenzy and putting in money all over the place. So we had to make sure of that. That's how we started.
That's how the journey began. And you put it in sort of three pithy comments, Hari, when you say fill rate, the on-time delivery, and the in-stock as the three golden metrics. But having run a supply chain myself, I know it takes 30 seconds to say and it takes years to accomplish. So I want to ask you the question of, you must have felt the tension between, hey guys, good enough, let's go for it now, let's scale, because that's sort of the popular notion, right? If you're not scaling, you haven't built anything meaningful. How did you resolve that tension, Hari, between let's get these golden metrics right versus let's grow the business? Because there was sort of competitive action also that eventually came along, right?
Yeah, it was hard, Saiki. It wasn't easy. We had to tell ourselves that, listen, while we are building these metrics, we can't stop scaling. So we need to kind of make sure that, that you are in one city, you're getting more customers in that city, you add another city. But what we had to resist ourselves from doing was this whole expanding to 30 cities and, expanding to multiple formats overnight, right? And that was a temptation we really managed to hold back. And, this is where actually, a lot of your conversations with the board becomes very important, because I think that's the support that we actually got at that point in time. And I think I'd spoken about this. We used to as a board at that stage meet twice a month. Forget once a quarter board meetings, right? So we used to meet twice a month. Today we meet once a month, even now, after 10 years, right? And the key thing is that some of these calls that you take, some of these decisions that you take, if the board is with you and the board is backing you behind it, it makes you feel a lot more comfortable, because it's normally the other way, right? It's boards that really push you, to kind of scale. So that we did very well, effectively told ourselves that this business will not work if you don't get these three right. Let's be clear about it. Internalized it like crazy.
I want to go a bit deeper on that, Hari, because on the one hand, now in retrospect, it seems, of course, obvious, right? Getting those sorts of fill rates on baskets that I'm guessing were 20, 25 items, right?
Correct.
So on a large basket of fresh items, getting that fill rate is almost the holy grail of grocery. But to keep yourself disciplined, saying without that, we're not going to do it, where does that come from? So where did the courage, conviction, how did you agree those principles? Was it just strength of character for the team that got this going? Or talk us through a little bit, what was the process behind the operating work you were doing, which allowed you to get that sort of conviction and alignment, not just internally, but with your board as well?
Yeah, Saiki, the single biggest thing that I think we did well, right? To make sure that we are on course to meeting that number, which by the way, we had told ourselves that all those three numbers must be the best globally, right? That's what we told ourselves, because there were few players, globally, and we had the numbers, right? So we said, number is achievable. I think we can get to this number. So that was the real goal, for which we had to actually make sure that we set ourselves and set that small organization that we had at that point in time to actually go for it. I think the thing that we internalized very early in life is that this business is a business of being driven by processes, right? And that was so critical for us to tell ourselves, because we knew that the first thing that people want to break is a process, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the whole thing behind Jugaad, right? And this whole story about, you know, saying no to Jugaad. We told ourselves that we just have to be hard and tough to make sure that we don't allow it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the lesser of it we allow, and the fact that we don't allow it and it never happens, is what will actually get us there. Because to get there, I think you need to build a culture, build an organization which is highly, highly process driven,
Yeah.
right? And each process enabled through state of the art technology. That was really the only way we could achieve it, right? The
Yeah.
second part is easier, right? Because technology had become cheaper, and the whole host of technology, tech people available. The first part was the harder part, right? To make sure that people follow processes. People don't break processes. Absolutely no jugaad in the organization. Literally telling people that once we adopt a process, we all become robots. You just work like robots, right? In which case you don't look at anything, just execute. Just execute. And the execution has to be absolutely flawless and brilliant. So process is one, writing a process is one, executing on that process is the tougher part again, right? And that requires discipline. So Psyche, I can't think of anything else, right? Other than this one single thing that we drove so hard and believed in, that got
Was
us
it
there.
this, was it this sort of passion at town halls every day? Was it,
Yes.
talk me through, like break it down to the little things, Hari, because it's one thing in your heart to know that process is everything, high fill rates is critical, that customer at the center. But how did you make it real? That's the part I'm sort of struggle to understand from the outside in. For everyone who is joining the company, how did you make it real? Just break it down for us in terms of some of the things that you did.
It's all about first, you yourself demonstrating that, right? Which means that you have to make sure that you believe in that whole culture of no jugaad to such an
Yeah.
extent, right? That if that doesn't happen, it doesn't work. So that's the first thing we told ourselves, right? We need to demonstrate that, right? We need to make sure that when we are talking about it, we believe in it so much. So that was one. Second is it's a constant process of talking to people about it. And I remember those days, the only thing that we used to talk about, and I have a colleague Sudhakar. I don't know how many of you all have met him. Maniacal about process execution, right? Maniacal, right? And so and he's so good at convincing people as to why it is important to do it, right? And why it's important to believe that this will help us and not constrain us. And I will at some point today talk about how we crack this whole piece of jugaad and process based, no jugaad and process based organization versus innovation, right? And I'll come to it, right? Because what it seemingly does, or people think, is that when you drive processes so hard,
Yes.
organizations like that just don't innovate. And
Yes.
I think we solved for that, right? And we had this at the back of our mind. But we told ourselves initially it doesn't matter, right? Initially you're not innovating as much, right? You have an idea which you need to build and execute. You have 3 metrics which you need to go after, right? You're not trying to do too many new things at that point in time. You've conceived of a few new things, now go after it, right? It was always there at the back of our minds that we need to make sure that we bring that balance at some point, because once you start scaling, then you'll have to start looking at doing things differently, innovating a lot, etc., etc. But that's one piece that we consciously knew, right? And said that it can't be at the cost of the other. So it's just sheer process execution, Psyche. I can't think of anything else. And I think we did that well. And thanks to having done that well is where what we are reaping today in terms of all the benefits.
All right. So this is too tempting to resist. I have to ask the question. I can't take the risk that at some point doesn't come, Hari, where you resolve this seemingly tough contradiction between super process orientation and a very high rate, because you started with this, right? You said you took on a very complex, hard problem to solve in the India context, not just grocery, but fresh, which would require an astonishing amount of innovation. But yet at the same time, don't break the process, no jugaad. Just talk us through how did you reconcile the two?
Yeah. So basically, when, that's happened when we started scaling, right? And that's when we realized that, we need to kind of make sure that one doesn't come at the cost of the other. So what we had done actually in the, right in the beginning was essentially we had set up very strong, good, powerful empowered process teams. Okay. And we set up two good process teams in the head office, right? And that's what we said. These are the two teams. And one was basically what we call the supply chain process team, which essentially looked after the entire supply chain side up to the point it got to the warehouse, right? The second part was the last mile process, right? Which is from the warehouse when it starts hitting the customer, and and between warehouses and stuff like that. So there were two strong teams we set up, and we said all processes will get rolled out only through these teams, all processes, right? So this team then was a built-in team that creates the process, documents the process, creates a training module for the process, executes and implements. So they go set up in a few regions and come back, and then they hand over. And they hand over to the ops team, to the regional teams that finally take it over and run.
Days, Hari, and it's still true today.
It's still true today, absolutely true today. And they are extremely good, two good teams that we have actually within the organization. So that's what we said. So all processes will roll through this team. So then we said, this makes life easy, because moment there is somebody who wants to do Jugaad, right? Which is good, right? You don't want to stop Jugaad. You want to not allow people to do Jugaad on the fly. That's what you don't want. You don't want people to come and say, every day I can't be sitting and taking a process and say, hey, listen, I think it works better like this. I think it works better like that, and execute it right in the field. Doesn't work, right? So if you want to do Jugaad, then please bring it back to this team, right? And this team then will work with you, right? And that got people excited, because they also believed that now I'm also contributing to it, right?
Multiply my Jugaad.
Exactly. And so we had then built this concept of building what are called cross-functional teams. So this Jugaad, when somebody brings in, this process team is the owner of that process, but there will be three other people from three other teams, because it hits different functions, will come together. And we said, let us set up what is called a KI, which is called a key initiative. It's nothing but a CFT, what's traditionally called a cross-functional team. And this team then sets themselves a deadline of taking that process, depending on the complexity. Some are 3 days, some are 2 days, some are 3 months, some are 6 months, right? Sets them a deadline. These KIs are reviewed personally by founders, right? And we used to get into, even now we do it actually, because that's something that keeps us excited all the time. Yeah. A lot of thinking now happens on the ground, right? So now it's not left to you to do all the thinking. But it's so exciting to sit and see a new idea getting worked on, right? And obviously you also feel like adding value.
What's the metabolic rate of these ideas, Hari? Is it ones, tens? Is it like lots and lots of ideas flowing in, or what's the rate of this?
Lots of ideas flow in, but actually, most of them are, we pick up maybe about, on an average about 2 or 3 a quarter.
Okay.
That's what we do. Well, ideas just flow in, quite a bit, because that's the thing that transparency has done for us. Another key thing in our whole journey, right? So because we always believe that, I call it WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So it's a typical tech term that we used to have with those monitors earlier, right? So I'll come back to that. So that's really the way we made sure that both coexist, right? So if somebody has Jugaad, the only thing was to keep telling them, keep driving hard, saying, don't execute it, right? Because in the process of executing, you may not have thought through multiple other things that it can impact, right? Let's bring it back. We'll create a team that will help you think through all those things, right? And the same process follows after that, Psyche. It goes through the thing, it gets documented,
The secret sauce is no Jugaad on the fly. We'll actually create a force multiplying team that will help you get your Jugaad done all over the company.
Correct.
And did this create the balance, Hari, between the process discipline bit I got, which is this team will codify and roll out, but the rate of the metabolic rate of ideas flowing in, what did you do to make that happen at a good rate? How did you make
sure? No, that just happened naturally, because actually,
do anything.
Yeah, because the idea was not to tell people to stop thinking. The idea was to tell people to think in a structured manner and follow a process for that. That's all we were doing, right? And so that worked, and that it'll work anywhere. It'll work, provided you actually think of it that way, right? I mean, you can allow Jugaad, and you can allow people to start doing it in a manner which will hurt the organization more than you benefiting from it, and that people figured, yeah, and people.
That's very powerful. That's very powerful.
People appreciate us for that, for having created a system where you allow for both, but not on the fly, and hence it's not no Jugaad. Sure, Jugaad, but follow a process for it.
You tricked us a little bit with the title, Hari, but It's sort of no Jugaad with the footnote on the fly. So no Jugaad on the fly. So the audience today got the secret sauce that it's no Jugaad footnote on the fly. And that's a good segue to our first poll question. Let's sort of get a pulse of the audience, Hari, on how they feel about this no Jugaad slogan. Let's trigger the poll. So question to our audience, please vote. Do you think Jugaad is a way of life in your company? Jugaad is my daily life. Yes, no, no chance. No. What is Jugaad? I would guess there'd be few in this country who haven't lived, breathed, and seen Jugaad. And okay, give it a few more seconds. All right, let's. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Hari, if you look at this, Jugaad is my daily life, and yes, it is a way of life in your company, 50% plus. So at some level, what you've done with this discipline of your cross-functional teams and those two process excellence teams, you very, very deliberately bucked a trend, right, of something that is celebrated. So super. Any advice you would have, Hari, to those listening in? So this is your daily life, and that's what gives you maybe thrills or keeps you excited. How do you keep that Jugaad or innovation instinct and still sort of force multiply it?
So that you need to kind of, you can't let that go, Saiki. You really need to make sure that, at any stage of the organization, right, that is one belief. You need to make sure people follow, and people are very much there. Which is why I think this bit that I talked about, it's not really no Jugaad, is coming out quite well, right? So there is, it's a combination of yes and no, which is correct, right? It's actually, it's not a strong no, right? It has to be a yes also. And the way you handle that yes is what I'm talking about all the time, right? So that's something that I would really, I'm telling you, most successful organizations will some form or the other follow this, right? And if you can't, if you don't, it's a very little chances of those organizations working, right? It's not possible, right?
You've talked through this one big element of reconciling the apparent contradiction between lots of Jugaad and multiplying it through process. Talk us through some of the other cultural principles that are a way of life at BigBasket, where they came from, how you make it real every day. Hari, talk us through some of those.
Yeah. So, let me just tell you about the way we actually brought this. Was a lot to do with our lives, our personal experiences, and hence we wanted to make culture very real. Yeah. This culture is not a Google searched, document culture, and which is what I was telling you, Saiki, that it doesn't come on our, on our reception table. It doesn't come on my reception table. We don't believe in these mission vision statements that don't come from inside, right, from deep inside, because you need to believe in them, right? So otherwise, you see some fancy statements which are put all over the place, and which is what I was telling you. It's not, culture is not something that we've ever thought of tom-tomming, ourselves about and going and talking about it, because that's really not what it's meant for. Because what it does, it gives the company an identity, it gives it a personality, which you need to kind of, nurture and go along as you go. So all these 4 pieces of values and 4 pieces of culture which we built, right, which we told ourselves first. One of the things we realized that this is a journey. Culture doesn't happen the day you announce the culture, make a card like this, print it, right?
I love that.
Each one of us carry this, right?
A famous card, yeah.
Each one of us carry this, and this is my old logo, so I haven't even changed that actually. So it's something that's so deep inside that you don't need to talk about it. So that is why every bit of this 4 pieces are something that we believe in and live through, right through. So let me just go through one by one.
Yes.
The first piece of our culture is to do with customers. Actually, before culture, I think I should talk about values, because that's so integral to your culture and elements and your cultural system working, right? Because you need to believe in certain values. So I think I should switch that. the first value that was so important to us is respect for people, right? And when I say respect for people, the reason we got this is that in our journey in organizations, right from 1983, 82, 83, when we started working, all of us, our founders, have seen situations where, respect for people is something that is so easily said, but so badly followed and implemented. Simple examples, right? You see board meetings with people on the board literally yelling, shouting, screaming, and putting people down in the presence of others. Shameful, right? And we always picked up some of these things and said, listen, how would you even allow such stuff to happen? And so it used to keep telling us that, this is one thing that if I run a company, I will never allow, right? I'm very clear about it, because I think every person sitting there needs, and Psyche, people talk about this, just don't execute on it. Just don't implement it. And I've seen it all over the place. Psyche, you would have seen it all over the place, right? Anger, screaming, shouting, no respect, right? It's something that was very, very critical to us. Listen, guys, we work together. I think basic respect is required. It's not to do with, his capability, incapability, whatever it is. But fundamentally, as a human being, I think we need to respect each other. That's the first thing, right? And it was so important to us, came from so many things that we've seen in the past, which actually just didn't work. Integrity. Everybody talks about integrity. And for us, integrity was not as much, while it's important, this whole thing about, swindling money and, and whatever else, right? To us, integrity was all about honesty and truthfulness, right? That piece was critical to us, which means that, have the courage to say, I don't know, when you don't know, right? That's integrity. So this whole thing about, and we've seen it across companies, Psyche, you've seen people faffing a lot. You've seen people trying to portray and project themselves, a lot more than what they actually are, right? And all they're trying to do is make sure that somebody else sitting across the table is going to feel happy, not knowing that that guy will never be happy, because, you're going to be seen through. So yes, this was critical to us, right? Integrity meant honesty, truthfulness, and the fact that you can stand up and say, I don't know, when you don't know.
So right? That's powerful, Hari. It's not cheating.
Correct.
It is a sort of a higher order definition, saying it is, you stand for the truth and you have to be honest in all your interactions. You have to further the cause of what you're working on, your company, etc. So it is a positive way of thinking about integrity, not an absence of negatives.
Well said, Psyche. That's the way we were always thinking of it, right? Third is transparency, and I talked about it a little bit. Transparency for us is what you see is what you get, right? So, you are absolutely open and transparent to the extent that one of the things that excited us the most, TVS Electronics, early days of FabMart, we used to have absolutely open offices, no cabins, right? Yeah. And we suddenly started liking it, saying, listen, this whole cabin culture is good. I mean, you need some time to yourselves, and you can always find that time. Create a cabin. Don't necessarily sit there, right? If you want a small room to lock yourself up to just think, all that can be done.
Yes.
This whole concept of open offices excited us, which means that you're approachable. People can come and talk to you, whenever you want. It's an open, transparent organization, right? What you see is what you get. Right? And that was, again, extremely critical for us. And it was, moment. And one of the things that we executed well on that was that to create a structure, organizational structure that can help this happen, is to be as flat as you can. Yeah. So we told ourselves, let's try and be as flat as we can, right? This hierarchical structures going down is what causes the issue, right? And then you don't just get a pulse of what's happening. The flatter you can get, the better it is. And that's how we actually translated some of those things to make sure that we execute well on transparency, happened. And finally, it's
again, transparency is something that is easy to write in a word, but translating it into an open office and a flat or absence of hierarchy is a very real structural way of making it happen, right?
Correct, Psyche. And finally, the fourth one is humility, right? Which is really, build an organization where it's so critical to be humble, so critical to make sure, couple of things, right? So for us, even if you look at the way we project ourselves to the press, for example, right? For us, it's all about being real, being true, right? I was talking to so somebody the other day, and somebody senior from the ecosystem, and saying, listen, I'm really surprised at how honest you guys are to the press. Yeah. I said, how else can you be? Right. I mean, I don't understand. So it's all about, making sure that, there is enough humility there. The other element of this is to make sure that, people give credit when it's required, right? So you kind of, if somebody is done well, you actually tell that person is done well. If you're able to kind of, not keep saying that, this was done by me and this was my achievement, instead just translate it and move it to people and make sure that they feel good, right? About what's being done, because genuinely, there is, unless those people were there to execute, it would have never happened, right? And so elements of humility is, that's, those are some of the things that came. So these are our four, value systems which we wanted to build in the organization, Psyche, which was very difficult for us to create and execute to before we came to culture, right?
There's also a flavor underneath this, Hari, which is maybe born from your point about this is a complex problem and ultimately we have to solve the customer's problems, not our problem. Or this is a no shortcut game. That let's not crow about achievements we haven't really achieved. Correct. Let's not try and make ourselves bigger than what we really are. Let's sort of go about this in a workman-like, honest, humble, and decent way. And that's the only way we're going to be able to do justice to this problem. So somewhere there is a deep recognition that we don't want to do a shortcuts kind of game here. We want to do something very, very real.
Correct. Absolutely right. Yeah. So that's why I brought in some of those things early when we were starting. So it was important. So that's values which I thought, the organization needs to ingrain well for you to get an organization that can deliver well on, on culture, right? In terms of making sure that there's culture. So, yes. So then we said, now there are these four things that are absolutely critical to us.
Just to understand a little bit the method behind it, Hari, these four things of respect, integrity, transparency, and humility. This was something you guys sat down and talked about and say, hey, what are we going to stand for? Was it a very deliberate process, or was it sort of very organic and evolved along the way?
No. So this we talked about. So we said these are the four things that are absolutely dear to us, right? And this is what we want to build as a value system for this organization. So we talked about it, right? And then the initial set of people, we got them into a room, and there was a process that we followed there, right? We put this up, and very soon we had the culture also, and we brainstormed a lot, saying, because unless everyone in this room believes in it, it's not going to work for us, right? And that's important for us to get that buy-in, and that we got right very early. But it's still a journey. This is not something that you can state, and we told everybody that this we need to evolve, right? We need to keep going as we go along and get stronger and stronger with these. But these are fundamentals that we need to have in the organization. And we didn't see any of those four values or any of these four cultures, elements of culture that I'm going to talk about now. Rocket science. Yeah, there's nothing else. It's just that it has to be believed in, it has to be executed, and it has to be simple. Yeah, that's critical, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work. And that was the whole basis. So coming back to culture, I think we started and said the first thing we want to hit is customer. Yeah, in the sense that is the core of this organization, right? The customer being happy and the customer being taken care of is absolutely critical. So build an organization that's absolutely maniacal as far as the customer is concerned. I'll give you a small little story that I talk about all the time. Because I feel so proud and so happy about this element working so well in our organization, right? Really proud, and I'm so happy for my entire team for believing in it and actually delivering to it. We have these rewards and recognition programs, right? And we call people and, reward them. And in fact, now we even call their families. You won't believe it. These warehouse pickers, packers, delivery boys, the parents are actually in tears. They are in tears when they see their child who's never won an award before in front of 4,000, 5,000 people clapping away, right? And he goes to stage and gets this piece from me or somebody else, they actually start weeping, right? So we said, listen, this is creating such a great emotional connect, that we need to do it more and more. And so now there are regions that even go and deliver that to their houses. So one team goes in Ahmedabad, they go with drums and all that. And the whole street wakes up, and just imagine that child, right? That boy, just imagine what he feels. So let me come back. So we had this first one in 2011. So there were about that time, 20, 30 people. Now there are thousands, right? So 20, 30 people sitting in the crowd. And, so I went up on stage and, I just asked these guys, say, listen, who pays you your salary? So one guy said Hari Menon. The other guy said HR. The third guy said some name in HR, right? And said, yeah, that's where our salaries come from. And, from that day, Saiki, is when we took this challenge to work on this. And today, when there are 5,000 people and I address them, in chorus, they will say customer. In chorus, you will find a loud, thing saying customer. So then the thing is to internalize to them that, each one of you and the work you do, impacts the customer, right? Each one. And so now there are boards in every part of our organization that talks about that day's customer metrics.
Yeah.
Earlier we used to have these 3 metrics. Now these 3 metrics are there. People have got so used to those 3 metrics. The critical one for us now is customer. So we have this customer metrics which are displayed on every board in every warehouse every day.
Yeah.
And actually there are people coming and asking, shit, we did badly today. What went wrong, right? Why is the number dropped? Which customer was unhappy? Yeah. Right? And
what's on the board? Hari, give us a flavor. What's on the board?
So basically we track this, very, very closely is that number of complaints to orders, right? That's what we track. And each one of them has a target. And then it's broken down into the top four areas that caused it.
Understood. Right? And this is daily.
Daily, every day, right? And this is reviewed, very, very, very stringent review processes we have on customer metrics, very stringent, right? And that's what keeps us happy, saying you're now executing to it here. Customer is king.
The magic of what you're saying, Hari, and I don't even know if you realize how effortlessly you're combining the two, but you tell the story of an emotional connect with someone winning an award and their parents weeping at seeing that moment with the metrics that someone is looking at day in and day out. And somehow this yin and yang of making it mean something, the chorus in your town hall, and making it real every single day. I mean, that's much harder to do. It's easier said than done. And is that something that you've been particular about for everything you have in your sort of culture document, that, hey, what's the way this is going to be both emotionally real as well as something we can measure?
Yes. Because, there's a huge emotional element in me. In fact, my founders keep telling me that you just go berserk the other way, right? So I think you need to bring in. So take
it easy, Hari.
It's been 25 years we know each other, yeah. So and what do you want me to do? Yeah. So it's all about saying Hari shouldn't change, right? So it's about bringing in the emotional element, right? Yeah. Very, very strongly. Yeah. I have a huge belief in it, right? And it's not that customer crying. It's not a big drama and tamasha for us, right? It just makes you feel how important it is for them, right? And then when I go and tell them that how much this has impacted a customer and hence our business, that makes them feel even more, even more critical and even more important. Feel good. So that's one. The second one is, demonstrating an urgency and speed, right? That was critical to us because it came to us very early, right? Because we had to make sure that that in anything we do, right, there must be a sense of urgency and a sense of speed, right? To make sure that we are nimble, we are fast, and this is about startups, right? And it is about startup. So you would ask me why do you need it? If you don't do it, you'll be dead anyway. That's true of any element of your culture, right? If you don't do it, and I think if you don't do it, you'll be dead, right? And so this was very important for us to continue to remain nimble. And so it tells ourselves that after 10 years, are you still a startup? So what's a startup? So, so we are not a startup if you want to participate in an award, right? ET still wants to give us an award for a startup. And we keep telling ourselves, we're not a startup anymore. Yeah. So those things are not important to me, but you are continuing to be a startup, right? I was just speaking to the entire management team of Britannia 2 days ago, right? 100 odd people. And essentially the only thing that they were trying to derive and get out of was, how do you function as a startup? What are the elements to run as a startup? And to me, being nimble and speed are the two most critical, elements of, of that. So we had to bring it in. We had to make sure that this element is now part of your culture. You believe in it, and hence you will do it, right? Because we need to bring that, third.
And this one again, Hari, so make it real for us. So again, these are, you've done it for every single thing you've said so far. You managed to do it, which is beyond the statement. How do you now make it a reality? This nimbleness.
So that's about, setting yourselves targets and goals there. So in the sense that every project you set yourself timelines, right? So those timelines are usually extremely aggressive, right? And what happens is when those timelines are aggressive, people tend to get jittery, because sometimes, there's always this belief that, make it too tough and make it too complex, and people will start, it'll start working the other way actually, because people will know that it can't be achieved, and hence what's the point in even starting? So you needed to tell people that, listen, there's a reason why we're putting that number, because we think it can happen, but it requires certain amount of, energy and certain amount of stuff to be put behind it to kind of meet that timeline, right? So our timelines are aggressive all the time, right? And we set ourselves very aggressive timelines. Important thing is what will lead to the third thing, right? Which is my third culture, and that is why these two play together, and that's why I thought I'll get to that, which is this whole element of giving freedom, right? But with responsibility. Now this is very, very critical, and let me give you an example. One of my things I keep telling my people all the time is that my style, my management style, our founder style is, as soon as you join, actually I was asking Hari, should we actually do this? I was asking Tanuja, should I actually do this, Tanuja? Is that give them a rope and let them keep that rope with them. What is that rope all about? You climb, or you just tie a noose around your neck. And that is the freedom you have. Right? But with responsibility, which means that you need to make sure that you don't misuse that, that entire freedom, because if you do, then you know what that rope does for you. So if that rope is a great indicator, I seriously, Saiki, I was actually telling myself and telling the team that how else will people internalize this, right? You tell me. Yeah. So people today are so happy. One of the things I'm most happy about in BigBasket is freedom, right? And it's come with responsibility, because I think we've told everybody.
Freedom is either a ladder or a noose. You don't have the option to sit on it. You got to make something of it.
Yeah. So it's a rope, right? You can tie a rope and keep climbing and doing well for yourself. At the end of it, you can just tie a noose. So that was important, to keep on driving. And people know this, right? People know this, that there is tremendous amount of freedom in the organization. I think this one culture we built well, right? And this is by pure communication, demonstration, talking, people feeling it themselves, right? And then making sure that they're responsible about it, which means you don't kind of, you don't kind of, throw it away. And that is what actually helped in essentially getting in this whole worry away, that setting targets, right? Doesn't kill me, which means that if I don't achieve it, but I've demonstrated the fact that we have worked really well towards it, right? This organization supports it.
Yeah.
And that's what helped, that the whole element of, of speed. And finally, the last one is basically all about, taking ownership, right? In everything, taking ownership in everything we do. So what does that mean, right? We realized very early, Saiki, in our stuff, that this organization will have multiple moving parts all the time, right? Yes. And so if you're wanting to deliver to a fill rate, it can't be just delivered by one function. There will be some multiple functions that that will need to actually work together. No single function may have complete ownership or complete the ability to actually deliver to it. Now, let me give you an example, right? In our business, there is no physical selling. Nobody is going and selling, right? So you look at my regional head, who's like a CEO of the region, right? We have our P&L is a unit, right? So the guy who heads Karnataka is the CEO of Karnataka. It's like telecom. almost like telecom. And he's a board senior responsible guy because he runs his P&L. Right? Now, he can't control sales, right? Because he's sitting there and his basic job is operations, right? He's basically managing these 3 metrics and some multiple more metrics. He's managing a large people workforce, right? And multiple elements of our culture and value systems he builds in to make sure that system is well oiled and works well.
Yes.
But he can't deliver to sales.
Correct.
Sales is marketing, right? Which actually sits in the head office centrally and drives marketing, because that's how your consumer business is, right?
Correct.
The thing that we wanted to drive was that this CEO owns sales, right? And that ownership we really wanted to bring in spite of not having control on it, right? So now, how do we bring that ownership? Then I tell myself that if I have to achieve the sales, hey, listen, my metrics can't fail because that's such a critical element of sales. Now I will do what I can control.
Yep. Yes.
Right? So that was that concept of of making sure that there is high level of ownership. See, ownership is easy when you control everything, right? Then it's not a.
This is a big one. It's a big one, Hari, and I would love to probe further, but I'm also going to cut over to questions from the audience in a minute. And for those of you who are listening in, please start logging your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this is a big one, Hari. This is almost sort of violating one of those core management principles that you have to hold people accountable for what they can control. What you're saying was, hang on, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually asking you to own something you don't fully control.
Correct.
Because to get eventually something done for the customer, multiple teams have to work together. And I need people to step up and try and make it happen no matter what. So you almost said that I'm going to ask you to own things that it's a discomfort, which you don't necessarily control completely yourself. So that was a deliberate move.
Correct. And one of the things I hate in life is silos.
It's not my job.
Exactly.
That's poison. That's poison.
Right? Yeah. I just, and everybody dislikes silos. But, silos are actually an essential part of an organization. You'll find an organization, silos get built, right? They do get built. It's your ability to manage those silos is what's more important. And one of the ways to manage them well is to bring this element of culture within your organization, saying, I don't control everything, but that doesn't stop me from taking ownership. So it doesn't stop me from going up there to a meeting and presenting to the board saying, I missed my sales target.
Yeah.
Right? I missed my sales target. It's my job to have pushed marketing. It's my job to have pushed people to make sure that I get what I need to get. Right? Rather than saying I didn't control it.
Understood. Super powerful. Hari, thanks for that. I'm going to, there are quite a few questions. I'm actually going to start with a question that my friend Kunal at Work India actually emailed to me in advance, Hari. So for that extra diligence, I think it deserves the question being asked. Kunal's question, Hari, is talk a little bit about the competitive context when Grofers got a massive amount of funding. There was a lot of debate about what model works, what doesn't work. I can see a small smile coming to your face, Hari. What was going on inside the company? How did you sort of figure out how to navigate that situation, and did culture at all play a role in that situation?
Yeah. So, oh God, yeah, I smiled because, it's so much there in my head, that those 4 or 5 days, right? And it's because when there are 2 investors in this country who invest in a company, then competition dies. So that was the saying, right? So if there are these 2 investors, if they go and invest in your competitor, you're dead.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what happened.
Exactly.
Actually, and that's what happened in 2014 or 15. I don't remember the date exactly, but that's exactly what happened, right?
Yeah.
And if you read the book, it also says that a week before, one of those investors came and met me. And we were, it's in the book, and we chatted and stuff like that. At the end of the meeting, that investor actually told me and Vipul that listen, we have you guys have really done a wonderful job, blah blah blah, and but we're going to invest in this other company, which is a new model, which is asset light, and we think that's the way to go in this business, right? And That was a week before. And then exactly a week later, that announcement happened.
Yes.
Board panicked.
Yes.
Right. First thing that happens is the board panics. Everybody internally.
That was a recipe to get blown away.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
So everything internally is now saying, hey, now what's going to happen? And the model is basically essentially saying that I won't have warehouses, I won't have capex, I'll just go and buy from a retailer and deliver.
Correct.
For 2 days, frankly, Saiki, the three of us just locked ourselves up, right? And including a few of our other colleagues, and essentially just broke that piece down and said, listen, let's just understand this carefully, right? So let's not just get carried away. We've done so well last 4 or 5 years. We built such a valuable piece, right? You don't want to now get distracted by any such move that's happening. So we just sat. It took 2 days to just sit locked down to break each element of that, of that piece, which is to say, what are the good things about it? What can work? What can't work, right? Frankly, at the end of the 2 days, it's just sheer conviction and belief of the management team that actually stood up and said, we just hold ground. Right? Because, that model we knew won't work, right? But when you throw capital at something, right, it disrupts and, destructs actually, more disrupting.
So it has to have impacted numbers, right? It has to have impacted you, but you said, no, hang on.
Yeah. So initially you can have customers going, moving, trying it out, checking it out. And once customers go, then, then they have to come back because they don't find their experience great and all that. So it can create a bit of chaos. We told ourselves, so be it, right? Doesn't matter. I think this requires guts. This requires you to tell yourself that, listen, we will live through that, but we are playing this game for the long term. We're playing, and that's the whole thing I talked about earlier, right? So this whole concept of fresh and bringing it all together was, otherwise we never got fresh if our business was not. So this is 20 years ahead, right? So we can't do something which we don't believe in, right? And we just stayed put.
Was that also the time, Hari, when you actually increased the frequency of your board meetings?
Yes. No. That was the time we actually were, I think, we're running at once a month. We had moved. We had cut it down actually. From doing twice a month, we brought it down to once a month. But we couldn't have done anything better than that, because by the time the board was, slightly largish. And so clearly, and I think when we went and made this presentation, the same passion, the same belief systems of ours, saying that, listen, this is because we understand this category well. It's not a technology play only, right? The other interesting thing I keep telling people is that when they ask me, and it's just related because that's the belief, and I'll spend just half a minute on it. People ask you what are you, right? In that sense, from a business perspective. So my normal answer is that I am a grocer, right? So people get surprised many a times, right? So I said I'm a grocer. If I don't believe that I'm a grocer, there are elements of my business I would have never built. Oh, so this is not e-commerce. It's not technology. So I keep telling them jokingly, saying, no, when I meet an investor, it's tech. I get better valuations, but otherwise, heart of hearts, I am a grocer, right? And that's the belief that actually drove us to say we will stand by what we are, because we know that business well.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, Hari, that thread has run through every single thing you've said, not just today, but every time we've ever talked, is that keep it simple, and what is the truth of it? Be it respect, integrity, humility, or grocer. The gift of being able to boil it down to its core reality and no BS, right? No fooling ourselves. More importantly, you fool other people, but don't fool yourself for what you really are, right?
Correct.
Super powerful. One more question here from Rahul Chaudhary, Hari, which is, in this 3-metric sort of obsession that you had, you must have faced some trade-offs, right? Like trade-off between in-stock and say inventory turnover, or on-time delivery versus last mile cost. How did you handle those difficult trade-offs when you were chasing those 3 metrics?
Yeah, so the real trade-off was that for us to get to those numbers, we would actually have to make some fundamental investments early, right? Which means that we had to make some certain capex investments which were earlier than what we actually would have liked in that sense, right? So we didn't have any trade-off on metrics, right? So this metric wouldn't impact something else clearly, because these 3 metrics were so critical. The only way, in fact, you would achieve it is when 5 other metrics work, right? And so from a metric standpoint, there wasn't a trade-off. The trade-off was that you're going to build a capex heavy organization, right? Versus an asset-led organization. And this we realized early enough, right? Even before there was anybody else in this, in that space, that the only way that you would meet these metrics is by control on inventory. And if you don't control inventory, you will never meet these three metrics. And to control inventory, there is a certain amount of capital expenditure you'll have to incur earlier, hence raise more capital early. And that was the only trade-off. It's not a trade-off. I mean, if you're able to do that, and which you did well.
So these were three metrics that were deeply reflective of the design of the business, not just something you, understood, Hari. I'm going to take one more question. I see we're 1 minute over, but again, lots of
questions. Stellaris, is it? Rahul Chaudhary, no.
Rahul, I think this is my friend Rahul from Trebo.
Oh, okay.
Hari. So there's a question here about what do you do when team members are not aligned with this sort of maniacal process orientation?
Saiki, that's a hard one, right? And it's happened. We've had enough experiences. There are only two things that we tell ourselves that we can do, is that spend time, right? Make that rope a little longer, right? Spend time and try and see whether, you meet somewhere in that belief.
Some common ground, yeah.
Don't, Saiki, it's early and good that you call it off early. Right? And that's hard, right? It's not easy, but that's what we've done, Saiki. And if you're not aligned to something which everybody believes in together, and so if you see, that was important for us, Saiki, that we needed to get people to believe in it, right? And then obviously there will be people who won't, and people will have discomfort in kind of going through some of this. So very clearly that you make the rope longer. You spend time, you have these conversations, good conversations. And I love those conversations, right?
Yes.
And it works at times. If it doesn't work, then it's easier early to part rather than not being part of the culture.
Understood. Thank you. Thanks, Hari. I mean, this is an impossible conversation to summarize in any way, so I'm not even going to try. But all the way from the very powerful way you made simple values like respect and integrity come to life, Hari. The three metric obsession, the running towards the hard problems, not away from them, the dealing with the World War III scenario of competition, getting funding from the two sort of big investors. This has been an incredible conversation, Hari, as always. Thank you so much. There are so many questions we haven't answered. Maybe we do a Q&A with Hari as a follow-up to this session. We need to figure this one out. But thanks so much, Hari, and all the very best.
So much. I really enjoyed it. I was actually telling my wife yesterday that, listen, I've never done this before, right? That I'm really just sitting here and talking about culture. So I'm just telling her that it's so much within me and within us that I hope I just don't go all over the place. And that's one thing that Saiki keeps telling me about. I go all over the place and don't let anybody else speak. Anyway,